Hey, welcome back. It's Louisa Munson from the Feel Good Astrology Show tonight on Friday, the 5th of May, 2023, just before the full intensity of today's full moon, which is also the penumbral lunar eclipse. Now, I'm not actually doing a show about the penumbral lunar eclipse, even though it is happening right as we speak in different parts of the world. But that's because I've already recorded quite a bit about the eclipse, and there is a video called, I think, Clash of the Goddesses or something like that in my playlist for May. So check it out if you haven't already. I'm a little bit worn out, actually, I have to say. How are you feeling? I can see I've got a few people watching already, and I've got a comment or two coming in, and I want to just apologize because I did actually have the intention of recording yesterday, and as some of you might know, it was my 10th wedding anniversary, and I don't know, you know what, I just needed a rest. Now, I did promise that I was going to have a look at some of the pointers of creating a good chart, like looking for a good chart to launch something, and really that came up from the discussion of weddings. You know, it's my wedding anniversary. How did I pick my wedding chart? I've picked wedding charts for quite a few people now, and it's something I really, really enjoy doing, I have to say. And I think if you launch something on the right time, it can have a really good effect in terms of longevity. Now, for those of you that are interested in the coronation that I have really slated the date of, by the way, I've actually done quite a long recording, and also recorded with a good friend, Alexandra Jowett, another astrologer from Jupiter Returns channel. And we were sort of analysing the coronation chart, which in and of itself is also a launch. It's a particularly poor one. But anyway, in my latest video that I posted, I think last night, I examined King Charles III's launch chart for tomorrow against that of his mum's, which obviously was a launch chart that, well, you know, when she became queen, she was queen for a really, really, really long time. So in terms of her launch chart, it was pretty good. Anyway, today I'm going to be looking at our launch chart, i.e. My own launch chart, the wedding for me and Carl back in 2013 on the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you. And also like show you the steps that I went through to find that date. There's really 4 clear steps. There's a couple more, but they're slightly optional. But yeah, you can use these steps for pretty much any launch that you wish to do. It's also good for a first date. So, you know, if you are single and looking to meet somebody, if you follow those criteria, it should really, really help in the flow. So anyway, before I get going, I will also say I'm not doing the forecast today just because I'm a bit worn out, and I just really wanted to get this out there rather than say I was going to do a show and then not show up. So it was more important just to manage how much I was doing. So anyway, let's just say a couple of hellos. So I've got the Ancient Mariner here, and the viewers are queuing up outside the door, waiting for the live stream to begin. Yeah, you got in nice and early there. Thank you. Oh, damn, I misread the title. I thought it was 4 pointers to finding a good lunch. Yeah, do you know what? There probably are some good pointers, and I'd like to know those too, please. We've got a lovely Benoit from Lisbon, feeling exhausted. Happy anniversary. Thank you, Global Nobles. And the coronation video was fascinating. Well, there's going to be a little bit of a tie-in, I guess. I haven't actually got the coronation charts in this presentation, but I could certainly add them in and check them against the checklist that I've got. So anyway, what I'm going to do is just bring up the presentation. And yeah, if you've got any questions about launch times and things like that, then just give me a shout and I'll answer your questions. So let me just make this even bigger. And make sure I'm in the right screen. So there's 4 pointers really for a good launch. Now it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 there. But I think the first thing you want to do is think about what it is you're trying to bring about. So you want to choose your lead, not lead, but lead planet, and have an idea as to which planet you want to really highlight. Now, for us, it was our wedding chart. So I really wanted our Venus to be in a good place because Venus is the planet of love. If you were doing maybe a travel or migration launch chart, you might choose to use Mercury because Mercury is known for being, a bit of a traveler, and is, known for delivering a parcel from A to B. If you're doing a business, you might want Venus and Jupiter to be really well emphasized. They're both known as the benefic planets, the good luck planets. You probably don't want your Saturn to be in a bad place, so you want to minimize the impact of the malefic planets, and those are known as Mars. Which, Mars is also the planet of action and direction. It is very useful, but it's also known as being a malefic. Also, you've got Saturn, which is a malefic, although Saturn can also be very useful when it's enhanced, because Saturn has a sort of business-like appeal. If you're doing something hypnotherapeutic, you might choose Pluto to be your lead planet because it's very much about transformation. So there's all sorts of different things that you might choose. And this kind of astrology is known as election astrology. You're trying to elect or even select the right kind of chart for the right kind of event. So I would always start with thinking about the lead planet. And for us, it was Venus. And you want to think or find a time. Now, hopefully, if you're looking at this and you've got a whole year ahead of you, which is what I did, when we were planning our wedding, I thought, okay, let's look at it through the scope of a year. I did have the idea that I wanted to marry between, say, May and August, but I was open to it being at any time in the year. And so what you want to do is, thinking of your lead planet, you might want to choose which position you want your lead planet or ruling planet in. Now, for Venus, and this is quite handy, I've got this little table here, thanks to, I just copied and pasted it off of somebody else's website. But I mean, this is basically a table that you'll find on lots of different astrology sites. But each of the planets are known to rule a particular sign. So this is where they have natural dominance or natural rulership. So the sun is the ruler of Leo, the moon is the ruler of Cancer, and so on and so forth. Now, when the planet in question is in their own sign, that's usually very, very good. It shows that they are very happy and those planets are expressing themselves beautifully. And then they're in their detriment when they're in the sign opposing the ruling sign. So the sign of Cancer, its opposite is actually the sign of Capricorn. The moon is not very happy in the sign of Capricorn. Saturn, which rules Capricorn and Aquarius, the opposite signs of those are Cancer and Leo. And so Saturn's not terribly happy in those signs. Then we've got the position that each of the planets is in when they're said to be exalted, like super happy, like it's even better than what their ruling position. And so in terms of Venus rules the sign of Taurus and Libra, and she's also exalted in the sign of Pisces. So I had a look at my, in fact, I don't know if this is going to show. So I don't think you can see this chart at all, but there's something that I use called a Raphael's ephemeris. This is the Astrology ephemeris. You can just download it from the website www.astro.com. One day soon I'll actually show you how to do that, but it's really easy. You just have to have a look. But it's got all of the ephemeris, which are the tables of where all the planets are in all the different signs and the degrees. Like, is it 5 degrees in the sign of Sagittarius, for instance? And you can see where anything is for a whole year ahead. And so I took the ephemeris for the whole year ahead and then thought, okay, so Venus is the planet I want to emphasize. I want to find when Venus is in the sign of Taurus and Libra or Pisces. Okay. And so then I just crossed out all the times when Venus wasn't in those signs. I also wanted to find a time when Venus wasn't retrograde and when Mercury wasn't retrograde. So again, on the Raphael's ephemeris or the Astrodienst ephemeris, whatever ephemeris you're using, you cross out all the times when Mercury is retrograde, Venus is retrograde, get rid of those. If you're determined to do that on a Saturday, then get out all the other days as well. So then you just really know what is the best planetary placement for your lead planet for the day that you want and the months that you want, and when there's no retrogrades. The reason you don't want retrogrades, and it's funny because before I actually looked for the right time of birth, the right time of birth for our marriage or our wedding, the actual ceremony itself, I looked up the charts of about 50 different celebrity couples. And I did a bit of a spreadsheet to have a look at their charts to see if all of these things that I was putting my own charts through really carried weight. So I looked at the charts of about 50 different celebrity couples, including those that have got divorced and then remarried to somebody else, to check the quality of them. And what I noticed is the ones that had Mercury retrogrades or Venus retrogrades, either they weren't still in those relationships or they were really, really bloody divorces. You hear about these celebrity couples that don't do a conscious uncoupling, but that they do the sort of all hell breaks loose kind of uncoupling. They all had something like this, or they had their lead planet or their ruling planet in a really sort of detrimental or a fall position, which is really bad. So yeah, I got really, really clear about those things. And then I started to think in terms of the moon, Mercury, and Venus. So I already found the time when Venus was exalted and also when Venus was in her ruling signs. So I'd selected those. I then also thought, well, Mercury is about communication. That's really important in our marriage. And it's also very important in terms of us being able to earn money and transact and do business. So I wanted a time when Mercury felt strong. So again, I looked into Mercury just to see if I could find a time when that would work. It's not always possible to find a really good chart. And then I also considered the moon. I have to say, I considered the position of the moon and Venus more than Mercury. And then, in fact, let me just show you. This is a bigger blown up version of this chart. But anyway, then I started to play around with some charts. So this is the chart for our wedding. I was also looking for a time when there were more pleasing aspects between the planets. So, for instance, once I'd selected my rough days, I'd found a Venus, and here Venus is in the sign of Taurus. So that's pretty beneficial. That's one of the planets that she rules. I chose the time when the moon was in Pisces. Now, that's not everyone's first choice, I have to say, but it's not in the position of the fall and it's not in its detriment. Now, the reason I went for Pisces was because I was also considering the chart of Carl and me. My own chart, my moon is in Pisces. In Carl's chart, his moon is in Scorpio. They're both water signs. So that felt pretty good. I was also looking for a time when the moon and Venus were in kind of sympathetic or empathetic positions to each other, and so every other sign has a kind of natural kind of goodness together, so I was looking at that and mindful of that too. You'll see Mercury is in the sign of Taurus, and Mercury, you'll see it's not in his fall and he's not in his detriment. So again, that seemed quite beneficial. Now, there's something called the moon's last aspect, and not many people talk about it very often. And I'm not entirely sure. I didn't have time to show you it today. I was hoping I might, but I didn't get the chance. But on the Raphael's ephemeris, there are graphic ephemerises which show when there's a particular position between the moon and other planets. And it also shows the last aspect, like the last connection that the moon makes to another planet before it goes into another sign. And the moon's last aspect, I think, gives you a kind of lingering taste. It's like an aftertaste. So I also wanted to find a time when the moon's last aspect to other planets was going to be beneficial. Was it going to leave us with a nice aftertaste? And I can't remember where it is. I think it might be. Yeah, the moon's last aspect is the last aspect that the moon made was a a sextile to Venus. So it's emphasizing Venus, and the moon and Venus in a sextile are really, really sweet and loving and gentle. Also, I've got that in my birth chart as well. So again, there was a repetition of a theme in my chart. So that's how we found that. Now, once you found the rough time when you want to have your wedding or your ceremony, you then want to play around with the chart. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to share a little bit more about the sort of decision making, and then I'll give you a little demonstration live so you get a better feel for it. Okay. So also, other things that you consider when you're having a look in at your dream chart, you might want to think, where will these planets be in a year's time or in 2 years' time? What's coming up? Now, there is no such thing as a perfect chart. I mean, this is a pretty good chart. You know, there's a lot of strength here. All of these blue lines, these big ones, are called trines, and they show where there's a lovely flow of energy, where it's really, really easy. And these little sextiles show where there's a lot of natural inherent strength in terms of the agreement of the marriage, or if it was a business launch or something like that. The reds show where there are challenges, and sure enough, there are some challenges, and there always are. But essentially, the chart is pretty good. Now, on the day of our wedding, we had 2 other astrologers at our wedding, and one of them's quite a famous one, Steve Judd. And Steve actually said you picked the best day of the year for your wedding. So I'm really kind of chuffed that in 2023 we picked the best one. But even when you pick the best day for you that fits in with your chart and your partner's chart, there are still going to be some indications, some things that you don't quite like. And one of the things that I found, or we have found as a couple, a little bit challenging, is the fact that our moon is so close to Chiron. And often when you get married or you launch a business, the chart starts to really reflect itself early in the first year or two. You start to get the real feel of what that chart represents. And the moon and Chiron in a chart together, in this kind of conjunction, can show where there's high levels of emotion and lots of hurt and lots of pain and wounding. And Chiron is right here on the descendant, which is all about love and partnerships, and also the friendships that we bring in. And it just so happened that around the time we'd already planned our wedding in advance, around the time of the wedding, some very close family members to us in our extended family were going through separations, and there were some very extreme family things going on, which just so happened to culminate at the time of our wedding, which was no fault of our own, but it really played out straight away, this moon and Chiron thing, because a lot of the people around us and in our family were hurt and wounded and very spiky for quite a few years. And it plays out in other ways because, Chiron and the moon is very much about helping people, but also helping people with emotional upsets and things like that, which works great as a coach. So it's great for my career, and it's great for Carl because he does a lot of coaching and he works with the general public, as many of you know. But in the descendant, it also shows that you might very well find a lot of wounded people or people with emotional issues that come up. So that was definitely something that we've experienced, to the point that about 5 years in, I actually said to Carl and a couple of good friends, I said to the friends, look, would you be witnesses, and let's reset our marriage. Let's find an even better chart than this one we've got now, so that we can reset it with things that we want to bring in, like a relaunch. In the end, we just decided to stick with, a real wedding date that we've got, but it's not unheard of. I've heard of people resetting their weddings and setting a new date. It's like a new intention time, and it can be really, really powerful. Now, when we were looking at our chart, obviously we were hoping we would be together in 10 years, and we still are. And, we're hoping we're going to get to 20, 30, whatever. This is a commitment we've both chosen for life. And hopefully that is what will happen for both of us. But all of these planets keep on moving. And so with every chart, you get to see where the planets are and how they might be affecting you. Now, right now in our chart, we've got Saturn coming into an alignment right over Neptune at the moment. And that can bring up a bit of depression and a little bit of introversion. So it's a little bit of introversion maybe, and questioning feelings that is sort of captured within the marriage. It might be that one person is feeling a little bit more sensitive than the other, and that it takes a little bit more. Then later on, Saturn will come into an alignment with our moon and Chiron. And, so we might find that we're being called into action and called to support some people. So I do imagine there's a little bit more support that we're going to need to give in the next year or two. We've also had Uranus going over our sun, and that can cause quite a few changes. Now, obviously, when we planned it sort of 10 years ago, I wasn't really thinking, as far ahead. And you can't really bulletproof any chart. But what is really helpful when you've got your birth chart or the launch chart or your wedding chart or your business chart, you can begin to see the flows that might come up. So this just shows, like with Uranus going right over all of these, Uranus started to go into the sign of Taurus 5 years after we got married. So I really wasn't thinking ahead. But Uranus is the planet of change and disruption and shocks and lots of new starts, but lots and lots and lots of new starts. And that has definitely been a theme for us. Funnily enough, at the time, we didn't know that we were going to migrate. And this chart with the Sun and Venus in the 9th house, the 9th house is one of the houses to do with migration. It's funny, we did ask for money as a wedding present to help us with a future migration. We had the idea, but I didn't really plan it thinking, oh yeah. But funnily enough, the 9th house is also about broadcasting. And, obviously broadcasting has brought in a lot for Carl. He's set up his whole business around his daily shows. And, I do a fair bit of that myself. So, it's funny how our marriage chart has really helped both of us come on in our own careers. And we've got Jupiter here in the 10th house, which is also about success. So that all looks good. Now, this is the bit where it gets a little bit interesting. So you can ask yourself, if I choose the chart at this time, and to be fair, with marriages, you might have to do it between, say, 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock on a Saturday, or you might not even have much of a choice for time. I've looked at charts for brides, that have maybe got 5 different days, but all the same time slots. And so I'll look for the absolute best that they can do for their wedding chart. And what I might do at that is look at what it might mean for their wealth, what it might mean for their health, and what it might mean for their home, family, and love. Now, I mentioned the malefics, and I did mention the position of Saturn. You also want to watch where your Pluto goes, because Pluto shows where things can be quite dire and where things might just never seem to get off the ground, where it almost feels like you've got to yield to something. And Saturn, shows where you might feel restricted. Now, it's really funny because an ongoing theme that I've spoken about with my husband quite a bit, and it's a bit of a sensitivity, and it's like, where does our money go? I know we earn enough, but where does it go exactly? And also, where is home? Where is that sense of belonging? And actually, it's so funny because right now, like, this is the area of money and this is the area of home, which are really important parts of a chart. But from the date that we chose, the time that we had available, the time slot that we were given, this was the best chart that we could do overall. But let me just show you how you can play around with the timing of the chart and how you can budge Saturn into a place that doesn't matter quite so much, and maybe Pluto into an area that doesn't matter quite so much. Because what you want to do is try and highlight the very, very best times. So it's like tweaking at the end. So let me just take this off the screen and I'll answer any questions if they've come in, and then I'll show you a little bit about the tweaking as well. So we've got a few questions coming in and comments. So Sarah's saying, hello, my love. Ola Amigos from Carl downstairs. Ancient Mariner is saying, I think I'll arrange my next wedding to fall on the 30th of February. Probably more auspicious than the dates I've chosen on previous occasions. Ancient Mariner, how many times have you been married? I mean, not that there's anything wrong with multiple marriages, but yes, it's interesting. dates. That's Carl saying. Owen is saying, "Hola, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend." And to you too, my sweetheart. And Zoe Kelly's Universe. Hello. Welcome back. It's nice to see you again. Okay, so let's just show you a little bit of a final tweaking then. So this is our wedding date. Let's just hang on. Has that come onto the main screen? Not sure what I'm doing there. No. Okay. Sorry, I'm doing a bit of technical stuff behind the scenes and hoping I don't crash the show. So fingers crossed I won't. Let's see if that's come in. Ta-da! Okay, I managed to do it. Whew. Right. Now, this is the chart for our wedding. And that was at 3 p.m. on the 4th of May, 2013. Now, what you can do is you can edit the time. Like if you are using an astrology program, you can change the time to see how it would change the positions of everything. So for instance, when you've got your perfect time, let's go for 9 a.m. on that particular day. And let's just see what's different. So you can see that the whole chart has moved around. Now, if I'd have picked this time for us to get married, there'd have been a lot more emphasis on networking, loads more emphasis on networking. So it probably would have brought lots of friendship and a really strong feeling of connection with the community that we're living in. It would also have the moon in a conjunction with Neptune in the top of the chart. Now, the moon and Neptune together can be really good. They can be really romantic, can also be very spiritual, but it could also help people get a little bit lost in the magnitude of Neptune. Neptune's got such a high vibration and it's so creative. You can kind of get a bit lost in it. And I've, when I've come across a lot of charts where people haven't been very certain about themselves, sometimes Neptune is around the angles. So it sometimes causes a little bit of confusion as to the direction because there is sort of like multiple timelines, multiple options. So I probably wouldn't have chosen that. Also, it'd have Pluto right on the descendant. And so Pluto it's definitely not an energy that we would want in our marriage because Pluto is like the planet of death and destruction and recycling and transformation. It would probably mean we had a lot of people coming into our lives that were kind of on a life or death mission, and people that would be quite exhausting. So we probably wouldn't have chosen that. Also, with the Saturn in the 5th, obviously we got 3 children. We had 1 at the time, but I did want more. I was hopeful that we would have more. And so I probably wouldn't have put Saturn in the 5th house because, we want to keep our 5th house sort of open for the possibility of children, and Saturn can limit that somewhat. So I probably would have discounted that. Let's just show another iteration of what happens when you change this. Let's do it for 12 o'clock. So it's just a little bit earlier. But if we'd gone a little bit earlier, we'd have had Saturn in the 4th house and Pluto in the 5th. Again, I probably wouldn't have done that. That's the home and children. That just puts the kind of difficult planets in a place that's really important to us. So we'd have just discounted that. So you get a feel for how you can play around with these different charts. So I'll just see if there's any other questions coming in. Ancient Mariner is saying, I can't remember exactly how it's about your weddings. I don't think it can be more than early teens, maybe a dozen times or so. It's all a bit of a blur, to be honest. Wow, it looks like you've had quite an adventurous life, my love. It looks like a diamond. Yes, it does. It really, really does. You're right, Zoe. I love, one of the things I really love about these charts is the fact that you get sacred geometry, based on how everything fits together. So for instance, if you have a look at that and then see what it looks like at 2, which is, it was 3 p.m, wasn't it? We got married. Can't even remember now, but at 3 p.m, I really liked this big old triangle thing going on. And it's almost like we've got 2 lots of big triangles. So it's not quite, like a six-pointed star, but it almost is. And I really liked that energy of it. But yeah, I really think the sacred geometry is something that you'll either really, really like or not. And so I always think that's quite fun. Is it bad to have Pluto in the 12th? Well, you know what? Pluto goes somewhere in your chart, and that's the funny thing. There's not much you can do about where it is in your birth chart. I've got my Uranus in the 12th. The 12th is a difficult house. So this is the 12th house that Zoe's talking about. And the 12th house is like the first house here, and we read the chart this way round. The first house represents our birth and our body and our identity. And then this kind of shows us our progress through life. And so by default, the 12th house is kind of like our demise. It's our unconscious mind. If you've been around people around the time of their passing, they tend to be 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in another world. They're in the place of the unconscious. So the 12th house is known as being the place of the unconscious mind, but also like the Akashic records, if you believe in them, the big cosmic mind, if you want to call it that way. It could be the universe. It could be just like a little drop in the ocean. Like the 12th house is a place that doesn't have boundaries, and it does represent our death. It's also associated with living abroad as well. So like the 9th house in particular, the 4th house and the 12th house really do show where we might be abroad. And so if you've got a planet here, it often shows that you might live somewhere away from home, or it will describe the kind of position that you might be in as you pass away. It's a really deep place. And it's also a place of our undoing, like the 12th house. It's our blind spot. So it's not always the things that we can see about ourselves. So I've got Uranus in here, just in a conjunction with my ascendant, but just in the 12th house. And so sometimes I get these quite uncomfortable instant knowings, because Uranus is about sudden change, but also about consciousness and channeling. And so sometimes I get these slightly scary channels or slightly disturbing new bits of evidence or information like comes in. But I have also had old memories that have been very, very disturbing that have just come up just like that. Now, Pluto in the 12th can be a bit disabling at times. You may well find that you have a very sort of all or nothing kind of programming. The 12th house really does show where a lot of our programming sits. So I've got a lot of programming with my Uranus there. I've got a lot of programming that just absolutely, I want to do things my way. It's really independent. And Pluto really likes to control and it likes control because it needs to survive. So there's a lot of issues to do with power in the 12th house. But if you were choosing, just to answer your question fully, Zoe, if you were and I'm calling you Zoe. I don't know if your name actually is Zoe or not, so forgive me if I got it wrong. But if you were choosing where to put Pluto in a marriage chart, and you don't want it in your home, and you don't want it in your money, and you don't want it in your kids, and you don't want it in your 7th because that's your partner and also the people that might come in your life. You might not want it in your 10th, which is about your career, unless your career is about having power, like if you're a government politician or a banker or a CEO or something, you might be quite happy to have Pluto there then. You might just put it in here because it's the lesser of all evils. So it swings and roundabouts basically. I hope that helps. So a couple more questions then. I'm a bit afraid to tell a very special soul how much they really mean to me as a Cancerian. Is there a good time for me? Well, yes, there probably is. And if I happen to, which I think I might happen to have, if I happen to have both of your birth charts, I can actually do a little comparison chart and then look for a good time for when the moon is in a good relationship to your joint moons, or going over a useful point in your chart. But yes, you could definitely use this to find the right time to tell somebody how you feel. It's not going to guarantee a good outcome, but it could really help you move on to the next in the next direction. Obviously, we can't guarantee other people's feelings, but what we can emphasize is good feelings as opposed to it creating bad feelings. So hopefully, if you get a good time, it should move nicely, whichever way it goes. And Zoe Kelly's universe is saying, I've Uranus in the 12th too. Now, if you're born, I know that Uranus and Pluto were together in the mid to late 60s, but I don't want to make any assumptions about your age. But if they were together in your 12th, that would make you really kind of psychic and really switched on. And it would also have them both in the sign of Virgo, most likely. If you're born a little bit after that, you might have Uranus in the sign of Libra and Pluto in the sign of Virgo. But it would really make you, I think, really want to test your psychic abilities. Thank you for that. Yes, so the late 60s. Thank you for that. It's interesting because with your chart, Zoe, from what I know, you would also have. Let me just demonstrate. You would have your Pluto here and your Uranus here. Obviously, the chart would be shifted, but you would have your Chiron and Saturn in the sign of Pisces, most likely, in that opposition. And people born in those years from 64 to 67 have got such a strong astrology. It's really, really difficult. And also a real blessing. It gives you a really strong desire to live according to what your plan is and not to anyone else's plan. So most of my clients are actually born in the mid to late 60s because of this very, very strong aspect. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap that up. Thank you so much for joining me. I was a bit of a blowout yesterday. But I've enjoyed coming on today to share a little bit about how you can use astrology to launch something. So think about, when would you like to launch something? When would you like to launch something big? And if you'd like to learn how to do that, what I can do over the next couple of weeks is maybe teach you a little bit more or guide you through the process. I'm really happy to make these shows into something sort of instructional and helpful. So have a think and let me know in your comments, drop me an email. Or something on the show notes. But anyway, thanks for joining me. I hope you have a lovely weekend. I'll be here on Sunday, same time, to do some free pop-up astrology readings. So take care between now and then. Lots of love. Bye for now.